Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
My house that I started renting in December of 2015 has completely upended how I see the world. I have always thought of myself as being an atheist for most of my life and have always tried to approach things with a scientific, evidence-based mindset. Well, as hard as it was for me to admit, the evidence says there is something supernatural in my house. Too many weird things have been building up for me to deny it anymore. I'm not very good at doing the whole Greentext thing, so I will just type it out. Sorry, but this story is long, but there is so much to it. Since I moved into this house a year and a half ago, I have always heard light movements around the house. There was knocking I could not explain, minor shit. I did not pay it much mind at first. After living there for 5 months by myself, I had 2 roommates move into my house as well. One of them, C, also noticed the noises, but he did not pay them too much mind other than to joke about it being a ghost. Now here is the thing. A woman did die in my house. An elderly woman who had lived there for many decades. Her husband is still alive, but he lives in a nursing home now. So I am an urbexer. You know, I go out to abandoned buildings and take pictures and stuff. It is a fun hobby. So this January, I made plans to go to an abandoned hotel that sits on a clifftop about 40 minutes from my house. But before I went, a woman who claimed to be psychic, who I used to work with at an old job, messaged me out of nowhere, giving me a very strong warning not to go to this place. She told me something was known to live there. I was just like, LOLK, so I went, did my urbexing thing, had a good time, blah blah blah. Ever since then, things have been very different. From that point on, me and my roommate C began hearing voices in other rooms around the house and the sounds of heavy footsteps. It has been so clear at times that I came out of my room with a weapon once because I really thought I heard someone in my kitchen while I was home alone. I get home from work, and my roommates ask me if I had stopped by earlier because they could hear me walking around in my room. All through February, these noise incidents continued. And one thing that I had not been telling my roommates or anyone else was that I had been very tired ever since that trip. My mind, usually pretty quick, moved very slowly when I tried to solve problems at work. For the first time ever, I fucked up the rent and accidentally turned in an inadequate amount of money to the landlord. And people started to notice. People at work were asking me if something was up. My dad, who spends his retirement traveling, returned to this area for my upcoming birthday and immediately noticed that I seemed disheveled and nervous and unlike myself. I had sleep paralysis a lot from when I was a teen until I was about 22, and I learned to distinguish its hallucinations from reality and how to not be scared by this condition. Well, my paralysis has returned since January, and the hallucination has been the same. The sensation of someone standing over me, watching me. Not too unusual for sleep paralysis. Well, in the middle of March, I once again woke up feeling like I had sleep paralysis. Feeling like someone was standing over me watching. It was the ghost noises, as we called them, that had woken me up actually. I decided to wait it out and just relax until the paralysis faded away. I stretched and got comfortable. Then I froze. I was moving. I cannot stretch when I have sleep paralysis. At the moment, it felt like 2 fingers being rammed up my spine. I rolled onto my back and immediately felt like I was being strangled. I fought and thrashed around until after about 1.5 minutes, a gasp of air escaped my lungs and it stopped. Let me know if you guys want to hear more because there is a whole lot more. But I do not want to blow up this thread if no one cares. I met a girl about 4 weeks ago. I am usually not the type to fall for someone quickly, and I did not exactly fall for this girl. But I cannot seem to help hanging out with her. I mentioned how I have just been so low on energy the past 3 months. Well, for some reason, when I hang out with this girl, and we always hang out late at night, I always feel great the next day, like my old self, It does not matter how much we drink or how late we stay up. Ever since I have met her, when I spend time with her, the next day I can wake up bright and early for work with no hangover, no tiredness, and just feel great the next day. Really great. Conversely, ever since she met me, she has been having the worst hangovers of her life. She has felt sick all month, constant vomiting, and just weak. I will explain why this is relevant soon. Okay, since the strangulation incident and since I met this girl, I have been noticing paranormal shit around my house less and less. Yet at the same time, my roommate C has been noticing it more and more, and for the first time my other roommate N has been noticing shit too, to the point that N has been waking up with unexplained bruises, much like I have been for months. Most dramatically, in the early hours of the morning, about 6 a.m. the day after my birthday party, I had a table get smashed. I had several people stay the night that evening because of how much they drank, and we were all awoken by a throbbing noise emanating from the living room. Sure enough, when we went out into the living room, my table was smashed, my internet shit was scattered all over the room, and my TV was lying face down on the ground in a puddle of water. My friend, a lifelong skeptic, said, "You are not crazy. I cannot stay here anymore," and left in fear. The following day, this past Saturday, I had a friend from college message me saying that he wanted to hang out with me. Me and him, since college, have continued to meet up a few times a year just to catch up, but every time I had always come to visit him. So I asked him what time he wanted me to come up, and he instead insisted on coming to see me. Now, I have never told him a single thing about my house ever, so it did not occur to me that my house would be the reason for his visit. But when he arrived at my house, he barely acknowledged me, and instead immediately began to look around my house. He said, "This house sat abandoned for several years, right? Before you moved in." I said, "Yeah, it has actually." He said, "A woman died here. Her husband still lives elsewhere." I said, "Yeah, actually. How do you know that?" He said, "Her husband looks like this," and he described his appearance perfectly. I said, "Okay, really, how the fuck do you know this?" He asked, "Did you know your house is haunted?" I said, "Yeah, I did." So my friend then revealed to me that he was an occultist, something I never had any idea about, that he practices black magic, and that just by talking to me on the phone from time to time, he had gathered that there was something at my house that had drawn his attention. He told me that there are two beings that live in my house, a demon that had followed me home from the abandoned hotel, and the spirit of the old woman that had lived here. He told me that the spirit of the old woman had felt confined to the attic ever since that demon had followed me home, and that it was her that strangled me in my sleep in a moment that she thought she could get away with it. The demon, for its part, has been draining my energy ever since January, explaining my tiredness and foggy mind. All this amazed me. There seemed to be so much that he knew that I had never told him about, had never told anyone about. And then this really blew my mind. He said, "You've made a new friend lately, haven't you? A girl?" I said, "Yeah, I have. What does she have to do with anything?" He said, "And let me guess. You feel really good after spending time with her, don't you? Like really good." I said, "Yeah, I feel amazing. That's why I can't stop hanging out with her." He said, "And she feels really bad. She's been sick all month." I said, "Yeah, she has been." He told me that much like the demon has been draining me, I've somehow made this connection with this girl and am using that connection to drain her. Like a fucking vampire. I've been hurting her, and I really care about her. I feel awful. Well, that night I ended up making a deal with this demon to find sustenance for it and to help care for it, in exchange for it not draining me anymore or hurting anyone else that I care about. I shook its hand. I felt it. My friend taught me how to not drain this girl anymore. I conspicuously followed his instructions, and she suddenly felt remarkably better this week, better than she has in a whole month. And now when I stay up late and drink, I get hangovers again. This whole thing has utterly changed how I view the world. I never believed in psychics, ghosts, demons, or energy before, but I just can't deny it anymore. Got anything you want me to clarify?
So how do you sustain the demon? What is the demon like, and what is the relationship with it like? Also, I was wondering if you've done energy work to gain control of the situation.
The relationship seems kind of friendly now. I kind of just talk a lot to it when I go around my house, almost like the way I used to talk to my old dog. And no, I haven't done anything of the sort. My friend only revealed all this shit to me last Saturday, and even though I was starting to think my house was haunted, I've basically been an atheist my whole life, and didn't put any stock into new agey sounding things like innate energy. He did teach me a bit how to control my energy, but that was mainly so I wouldn't harm my female friend anymore. And her health has improved dramatically in this past week. It hadn't occurred to me that you could use this sort of energy against the demon, but I don't really want to. It seems friendly enough. To sustain it, I've just been going around to all the old Civil War cemeteries as well as the battlefield itself around where I live. I went twice this week. It seems to feed off of the negative energies in these areas. My own energy has definitely started coming back to me this week though, so it doesn't seem like it's feeding on me anymore. So my friend taught me a little bit how to consciously drain people. He thought that if I knew how to consciously control it, then I would be able to avoid unintentionally doing it to my friend. And he seems to be correct. I just gave her a ride to work this morning and kind of casually asked about her sickness she had all last month, and she said, "Yeah, I've been great lately." Ever since that day I told you I looked up my symptoms on WebMD, then I just suddenly started to feel better after that. Well, that day she referenced was the same day that my bro came over. As for the old woman, I would like to help her. In a way, it is a bit surprising that I love 4chan as much as I do, because I'm honestly at my core a very compassionate guy, and I want to help people as much as I can. If I could find some way for her to be at peace, I would like to do it. My bro thought he could help her, but he did not think he could do it without actually going into the attic himself, and I do not own any ladders, so he could not go up.
I lived in a haunted house while I was 7 to age 10. We had just moved to a new town some 70 miles from where we had been living previously. My older sister, not wanting to change schools, moved in with my grandparents but spent most weekends with us. Despite barely being around, being the older sibling, she got to choose her room, and she of course chose the bigger of the two available rooms, one with a nice walk-in closet. A nice walk-in closet that we had to clean candle wax and chicken feathers out of. Yeah. We were told after buying the place that the girl who had been living in that room previously had been dabbling in Satanism and the occult. We also learned after buying it that it had been a local gathering place for years, and stuff like pictures coming off the wall and flying halfway across the room was a normal occurrence. All sorts of stuff happened the few years we lived there. Footsteps up and down the stairs all night. Weird images and photographs. Cupboard doors that were weighted shut opening themselves only to close again. Electronics were all fucked up. They would turn themselves on and off randomly, and you could sometimes hear voices coming from speakers that were turned off. My sister had a CD player that could switch between 3 CDs, but the switcher never worked. Except in her bedroom, which was the most haunted room in the house, where it would switch for no apparent reason all the time. The weirdness eventually got so bad my sister started bunking with me for her visits. All that said, no one was ever hurt, and it never felt like something was trying to oppress us. Just weird, unexplainable shit happened on a regular basis.
Around 6 years ago, so when I was 13, my great-grandmother died, leaving her pre-World War I house for my mom. It was in an awful condition, ceiling leaking, no water, no central heating. The first floor was pretty much falling apart, so we started renovating it while still living in the old apartment. The first paranormal thing that happened after Grandma's death and a few weeks into our work in the house was my mom's dream. She woke me and Dad up at 5 a.m. saying that the pipes had burst and the house was getting flooded. We didn't have a chance to say a word because she got dressed in a second and hurried us already to the car. We could hear the water flooding even before we got inside. A whole day of getting the water out. Apparently, it was Grandma who warned Mom, told her about everything in her dream. 2 days later, she also warned her that there's a thief walking around our backyard. We get there with several tools missing, and yet my mom still refuses to believe anything out of the world kind of spooky. As soon as we moved into the house, I felt uneasy. My parents and I had to live in the spacey living room together because the first floor wasn't done yet. I had my bed and my desk placed right under the stairs. The first month there was a literal hell. I could constantly hear and feel someone walking up and down loudly. Sometimes it sounded as if they were running. Things upstairs were getting knocked over. One night someone was jumping around the attic for a few hours. Before we painted the ceiling, a bunch of tiny, dirty footprints appeared on it. They have been there the whole time. I just bought the drywall in that condition. My dad chuckled, but we all knew they were not there before. Half of the house belongs to a different family, and the footprints appeared right underneath a tiny room of theirs. It is the only one with wallpaper still there and everything. I have seen it several times as a kid when visiting my nan, and I have always been scared of it. I would claim there were children buried beneath the wooden floor. After we moved, I would say there was a girl living there. I have got no idea where I got that from. Unfortunately, my room is right beside that tiny room. So once I moved upstairs, there was constant scratching, knocking, and whispering. I was haunted by awful nightmares that would wake me up at 3:30 every night. I would usually wake to a dark figure hiding from the light of my tiny light. I still leave it on most of the nights, even though nothing is really happening anymore.
We lived with my family in a very old farmhouse in rural Europe for a few months when I was a teen. I clearly remember strange things occurring there. Nothing that could be unexplained, I suppose, but there still was something weird about that house, a very eerie atmosphere. Even my parents agreed with that, and animals refused to sleep in the main house. There was a small secondary bathroom on the second floor, kinda off-centered from the rest of the house, at the end of a corridor. Its door refused to open from time to time. It was just stuck like that, and there was nothing we could do to open it. I would just turn the door handle up and down and try to lightly push or pull on the door, but to no avail. It was not a big deal since most of the time we used the downstairs bathroom and only ever visited the upstairs bathroom when we needed stuff that was in it, like when there was not any soap or toothpaste left downstairs, for example. One day my room suddenly filled with a pestilential smell. It literally smelled like death and rotten flesh, and we had no idea where it came from. It was a stone house and there was no wallboard, so once we removed every piece of furniture in the room, the only explanation was that it surely came from the wooden casing around the main beam running from one side of the room to the other. But when we dismounted it, there was nothing that could explain the smell. There were some mummified mice, dead spiders, and a crap ton of dust, but that is it. Even after we cleared the entire thing, the smell remained for a week or so, and it simply disappeared just as fast as it appeared. And the last thing was a small, empty room. It was next to a vast bedroom, probably used to be some kind of dressing, but we never made any use of it, so it was constantly closed. On the rare times I got there, it was during a storm when I needed to check if every window was closed. When I was inside, I could not hear the thunder. I could hear the wind and people talking, but not the thunder.
I spent 2 months living in a flat where a murdered child lived. For about 2 weeks, I was alone in that flat with no heating or electricity. To make things worse, I have every reason to believe I was staying in his old room. In the 1960s, a deaf kid who lived in the flat was kidnapped. They later found his body in some allotments not far from the flat with his throat slit. The most typical experiences were I would hear someone else moving around in the flat, even though I was the only one in the flat. It was literally like someone else was in the flat walking around. I felt like they were trying to avoid me. When I was lying in bed trying to sleep, I could hear it running around in the hallway. But if I got up, it stopped or ran into another room, typically my flatmate's bedroom. My flatmate had already moved some of their stuff into their room before moving in, including a bunch of toys, so they spent a lot of time in there. If I left my flatmate's door open, I would typically hear it slam shut only a few minutes later, even if all the doors and windows were closed. The toys in their room would change position every time I saw them too. The closest I came to cornering them was when I walked into the bathroom, and I could hear what sounded like someone drastically trying to get out of the bath and then run out of the door behind me. A few times I think it got brave and tried getting my attention. I'd be lying in bed, which was supposedly his bed, or walking my way towards bed, and I'd feel something tugging on my skirt or poking my arm as I tried to fall asleep. Another thing I noticed is that they would mess around with things in the kitchen. I could hear things clanging around in there at night. I soon realized they were actually trying to throw the knives away. I'd always find them shoved into the sink or towards the bin. At one point, I was truly bored in that flat and tried juggling with the knives. Stupid, I know. And I dropped one, and it cut my foot, not severely. But it definitely seemed to have triggered the ghost child as I felt the air pressure in the room change and could hear faint, disembodied crying. It sounded like a child crying mixed with tinnitus. At that point, I was truly spooked and decided to leave the flat.
I have dealt with some stuff in my house, but they were more of an annoyance than anything else. When showering, my shower curtains would push in, as if someone was trying to touch me from the other side. Also, I always keep my shower curtains open after I get out, and from time to time they would be closed when I go back in. I'm the only one in the family that uses that bathroom, so no one else would have closed them, and I had heard them being closed before when no one was in there. The doorknob on the inside of my room broke twice to where the handle would just spin freely. The first time I fixed it, the spindle had somehow gotten loose, so I adjusted it and it worked. The second time I was home alone when it happened, so I had to crawl out my window to go open it from the front. This time, though, the spindle was just completely smashed. No joke, when I took it apart, half of it was smashed to dust. I had a stereo in my room that would randomly turn on and eject the CD that was in it. If there was no CD, it would just keep opening and closing the tray. I was chilling in my living room one night on the computer, and my dog started to growl at something. When I turned to him, I noticed he was following something around the room and growling, even louder. In an instant, my computer randomly crashed. My turned to a static channel, and my dog's cage just fell apart. He ran to me, shaking and panting heavily. That was by far the most creepy thing to happen. Then one day, everything just stopped. It's been about 5 or 6 years since anything has happened.
I lived in a house with a lot of strange behavior. There were 5 of us living in a large old house, and the old woman who had lived there before us had installed deadbolt locks on every single door in the house. We thought that was strange until doors which weren't locked started opening and closing by themselves. The bathroom was a cold spot. It was always at least 5 or 6 degrees colder in there than anywhere else in the house, and it just had a bad feeling in it. One night I got up to use the bathroom and found the toilet paper roll unspooling itself onto the floor. I said, "Fuck this," and decided I could hold it until morning. The main focus of activity, however, was the attic. There were creaking sounds like footsteps which would walk back and forth from end to end in the attic, and when we went up there, everything would be silent and empty. Sometimes we'd hear boxes sliding across the floor and then bumping into a wall. When I first moved in, the guy I was replacing hadn't moved out yet, so I slept on a futon in the attic. People told me they thought there was a raccoon and they had a live trap for it. I was worried about sleeping in a room with a furious raccoon, and they showed me there's no way I could sleep through the trap going off. It was extremely loud. Every night they'd bait the trap with a can of tuna. Every morning, I'd wake to find the trap set off, the tuna untouched, and not having woken up all night. One day, my roommate and I were in her room. discussing all of this, and we heard a box slide across the floor in the attic over our heads. I complained about the noise, and the floor lamp beside us fell over, precisely between the two of us. The odd thing is, a few months after I moved out, they renovated the attic to turn it into a bedroom, and everything stopped after that and never came back.
The current house I am living in has seen many deaths. My grandmother, my grandfather, my aunt, and my father all died because of health issues, diabetes, cancer, and stuff like that. It is a big house, 3 stories high with 10 bedrooms. My room is on the first floor, and I converted the adjacent room into a gym with my weights and other equipment. After my dad's death, I was kind of depressed for some time and started drinking uncontrollably. I would be drunk day and night. I started hearing people talking and whispering in my gym room whenever I am in bed. I am not even sleeping, just laying in bed and starting to hear voices. I ignored them for the first few days because I was too drunk to think straight. Then I sobered up and still heard them every night. A couple of times I woke up and took pictures of the room with my phone, and every time the pics come out blurry and foggy. One night I woke up in the middle of the night after hearing some people calling out my name loudly, like they were trying to intentionally wake me up from sleep. I wake up, a bit spooked, and do not know if they are ghosts or if someone legit called out my name. I stay up in bed for a few minutes to wait for that person to call me again. But then again the whispering starts, and it is like they are talking about me, because I can make out my name in those whispers, and like they are laughing at me. My face when I got trolled by a bunch of ghosts.
I live in a 200-year-old building with a small shop on the bottom floor and 3 small apartments on the second floor. There is one apartment right at the top of the stairs, and mine is to the right down this hallway, with a stairway to the attic separating my apartment and the one at the top of the stairs. The last unit's front door is directly across from my front door, and my bedroom wall shares one wall with it. This story takes place around 3 months ago. I have met my neighbors at the top of the stairs many times, and they even babysit for some family friends of mine, so we are always friendly when we see each other. The tenants of the unit across from me, however, I had yet to see. Through our shared wall, I had heard some strange, sometimes gross sounds. It was not uncommon to hear the sounds of violent vomiting and phlegmy coughing at night through the wall, which initially made me think the other unit's bathroom was on the other side of my bedroom. I discarded this idea when I realized that I have never heard a toilet flush or a shower running the entire time I have lived here. I would also hear alarm clocks going off at pretty strange times, like 5 p.m., midnight, 3:30 a.m., etc. Sometimes they would not get turned off for hours despite me banging on the wall, and I even once knocked on the door to the unit. I never heard any movement when the alarms went off, so it did not seem like they were waking anyone up. I would also hear a man's voice occasionally, though I had never made out any words. I would also hear just this rhythmic, like marching band drumming that would play for hours, though it was usually during the daytime, so I would just hang out in another room. All that is not alarming on its own. However, I had a talk with my neighbors at the top of the stairs after a night of particularly noisy puking from next door. They told me the landlady's brother lived there, but that he only ever stayed there every other Saturday night and left early Sunday morning just to keep the place lived in, I guess. The previous tenant from about 4 years ago had completely trashed the unit and left on horrible terms with the landlady. My neighbor said the old resident mostly kept to himself, but said some pretty odd and out-of-place shit to her that she would not elaborate on. So basically, no one lives there. Since that conversation, I have tried knocking when I have heard the drum music, as well as when I heard the male voice, but no one ever answered. I should also mention I have never once heard footsteps through the wall, despite all the other noises coming through pretty clear. I called my landlady about the sounds, and she checked it out and assured me no one was in there. I just sleep on the futon in the living room whenever I hear anything at night anymore.
I was stalked by a Mishipeshu at my parents' place for years as a teen. I had no idea what the thing was for damn near 10 years, until I gave a description of the events and the creature's appearance on a thread I started here about a year or so ago. You bastards helped me figure out what it was. I was rather spooked to hear that was the case, as I knew nothing about the creature. I haven't even heard of the name before, and I lived on the outskirts of an Ojibwe Indian reservation, and apparently it's an Ojibwe mythological creature that lives in the region I lived in. I probably won't post the details of my stories unless there's some interest, and even if there is, I have to work, so I probably won't post anything after this for a good 5 or 6 hours. I also lived in a haunted house after I graduated college. Fuckers kept making noise. I set up an audio recorder for the day, only to have something shut it off and then start recording again as I was walking up the stairs. I heard footsteps coming down the wooden stairs frequently, even hearing the heel-to-toe sound of work boots walking down as the stairs would creak. I'd hear sobbing, laughter, arguments, my name. I'd see a man staring at me through the windows, so I covered most of the windows up. I'm convinced it was haunted, but there was also a ton of black mold at that particular house, so I could have just been imagining it. However, it seemed real to me, especially since the activity ceased once I performed a cleansing of the place. I lived there for 6 months after that and only heard a few creaks here and there after that. Alrighty, I'll green text this as to make it more palatable for all the /x/ files here. Be me between the ages of 14 or 15 to 18. I was a reclusive teen, only had a small handful of close friends. I would spend time alone, usually in my room or the rec room at my parents' place, either watching TV or playing PS2. Yeah, bro, San Andreas was my life. I always felt slightly off in that house. My parents built it on an old cattle pasture. Guess who had to pick all the rocks? Feels bad man.gif. It was a nice house, in fact. My parents still live there. But I always felt watched, ever since moving in when I was about 14. Shit never got better. Instead, those uneasy feelings only grew stronger with time. My uneasy feelings grow stronger. I eventually ask my parents if they ever feel lightheaded or being watched. They say, "Nope, derp, we have no idea what you are talking about." I would start feeling a presence near the doorway of my bedroom and other places of the house, only when I shut the lights off. I think to myself that I could just be a scared little punk, but unfortunately, that was not the case. The feelings of being watched continue to grow over the next few months after moving in. Eventually, I am getting these mental pictures of this thing watching me, like I was seeing myself or other things in real time from something else's view. I eventually get mental glimpses of the thing that is watching me. Nope.avi. The thing has horns, either fur or feathers, stood on 2 legs but walked on all 4s, dark eyes, and shape-shifted into a human. I thought I was going crazy, but again, I thought wrong. I look out the window a few times at night, only to see it walking in circles out in the yard and occasionally staring up at me. I think, fuck, bruh, why you gotta creep on me though? I never saw it in human form at that point, other than the mental glimpses it would provide me of itself. The thing had a dominating and almost an oppressive aura. I figured it could have been demonic, though I was not sure if it actually wanted to harm me. But sending me creepy telepathic images, no words, and I never heard it speak, just images of what it sees or has seen, is not doing my nerves any favors. One night I remember being scared shitless when I saw it in the hallway. It never made a noise, but I remember snapping a picture of it in the dark with my razor. Yeah, bro, razor was life. Let us listen to MCR and bitch about Iraq. I got the vague outline of it in its eyes. The thing was about 8 feet tall, was kind of slouched over and standing on its hind legs. Its horns were like a weird cross of a deer and a ram. It looked almost like the character on the cover of Shadow of the Colossus. That is spooky enough, but when I sent the picture to my friend from work, things got really weird. She asked, "What is that?" I said, "It is the thing I have been seeing. It sends me images telepathically." She said, "I see the eyes. It is freaky." I said, "Yeah. I do not know what it wants." She went on to tell me how there was a weird creature that would occasionally scare her family's horses on a farm they used to live on. This is where it gets really weird, as I did not know her for that long, but I replied with, I said, "Yeah, the one right by the townhouse off the county road, right?" She said, "Yeah, how did you know that?" I said, "It is there right now and is showing me the place." I am honestly getting goosebumps just recalling these events. She gets freaked out and thinks I'm pulling some sort of prank, as that thing tormented her family. I tell her the truth, and that this thing had been bugging me for a good solid year or so, and that she is the first person I have really told about it. She accepts what I'm saying, believe in me, no matter how bizarre the story seems. Now, as I mentioned, this thing was a shapeshifter. I had never seen it in human form, only through mental images. In those mental images, his human form was that of a man in Western garb, wearing all black. Fast forward to later in the week, a day or so after my friend and I had that strange discussion about the creature. That conversation in that house has been on my mind for quite some time. I know the area where it is at. The bus I used to take before buying my car. Used to drive past it every morning and afternoon on my way to and from school. I never paid much mind to it. It was just an old, abandoned house, a dime a dozen in those parts. I was 16 at this time, 2 years into my being stalked by this creature. The house is about 1.5 miles away from where my family and I lived, basically just down the country block and a little ways yonder. It is the early afternoon during a summer day. I did not have school and I was not working that day, so I figured I would go to the house and snoop around for a bit, seeing as how this thing keeps sending me mental images of it. Upon approaching the house, I see a man standing in the middle of what used to be a field, with the property's collapsed barn in the backdrop. I instantly recognized the man. He was wearing a black Western hat, a black dress shirt, a black bolo tie, a black vest, black pants, and black boots. He was all black, but he had pale skin. It was the creature, in human form. We made eye contact and he had a creepy smile on him. There was no vehicle in the driveway. I knew for a fact that house was abandoned, but there he was. Pick related, it's what this thing looked like. Oddly enough, this is a representation of the Mishipeshu from the TV series Grimm, a show that wouldn't be created yet for a solid 5 years. The strangest part was the man did not even pretend to be doing anything. He just stood there in the middle of an arid former field where barely any grass would even grow. It was as if he was expecting me, waiting to finally see me. I nope out instantly and keep on driving. Years passed, and the occurrences never really ceased. At least not until I moved after graduating college. Even during my years in college, I felt it around, as if it were still watching me, and it would still communicate with me through telepathic imagery. After I graduated college and moved far from where I lived, the sightings and communication ceased. However, to this day, when I stay over at my parents' house, I'll still occasionally see it or hear from it. Fast forward to about a year ago, I saw it when staying a weekend at my parents' house. It was burning in my mind once more. I needed to know what it was. Being an adult and seeing it and communicating with it, it didn't seem as threatening. It still seemed intimidating but not as oppressive, or it could be that I grew a respect for it instead of the blind fear I had of it in my youth. After seeing it that weekend, I started a thread on here and told my story, asking anyone who would listen what that thing may have been. One guy said it sounded like a Mishipeshu. I had no idea what that was, so I Googled it. It's an Ojibwe, though not exclusively, mythological creature that typically hangs out near bodies of water and protects copper, because why the fuck not? The land my parents built that house on was somewhat swampy, but we had a creek that flowed through our property, and we were on the outskirts of an Ojibwe reservation. The description of what Anon said, the creature matched almost perfectly to what I had witnessed. He suggested reaching out to the tribal leaders, elders, whatever they're called. I don't know the hierarchy of this shit, and asking if they had seen it or could fill me in with more info about it. I still haven't done it, but I've been contemplating it for quite some time. With the exception of you guys, I've only told 2 of my friends about my years of being stalked by a Mishipeshu. The second friend I told was just about a week ago. She said the thing probably meant no harm, and that it was curious, as I was the only person who really noticed him around. So, that's my story. I felt for a time that I was being possessed by this creature, this Mishipeshu. I can't really say there's an ending to the story because, like I said, I still occasionally see it when I stay over at my parents' house. Let me know what you think. I'm sure my storytelling could be improved, but that time was such an incoherent mess it's hard to tell a linear story when it was perpetually haunting me.
Okay, fuck it. I have lurked for years on these boards and never posted a single reply. I have also never explained these events to anyone in my life, so bear with me. Unless there is any desire for more details, I'm keeping this short because it probably is not worth the effort. When I was 6 years old, my poor family moved into a house in Redding, California, which we reference as the Blue House. My dad worked construction in San Jose, California, a 4.5 hours commute, so he was never home ever. The house we rented had previous devil-worshipping practitioners as tenants, known after we moved in, by the way, and we found random shit like devil runes behind the mirrors. My dad is hellfire and brimstone Southern Baptist ultra-God tier and knows how bad these things are. Long story short, here are the experiences just in the Blue House. My mom woke to a dark entity choking her in her room, according to her account. A burned man would stand over my sister's bed. She was 8 years old and walk into her closet when she woke up, according to her account, and that closet was facing my room. Some alternative info real quick. Great-grandfather was a very bad man. Chris Chan, alcoholic, abused my grandma and uncle, money poor, had a locked dungeon where he would do stuff to girls of varying age against their will, etc. But he was also a carpenter and made furniture. He did when his shop went up in flames randomly. And being poor, my family willingly inherited some furniture he built in his shop that was there during his death and the fire. An oak dresser for my clothes, since I was 6 years old. Connect dots. Satanic influences have triggered the piece of furniture imbued with dark energy from my great-grandpa piece of shit. Fast forward to my adult life and skipping many other instances. My sister at age 29 years old buys a new house in San Jose and needs items to furnish the new place. Dad donates a ton of stuff he kept in storage after my parents' divorce. Like fucking 18 years ago. They split when I was 7 years old and he still had a storage place for all this shit. Among items, the oak dresser is moved into her new house. That night, Burned Man is back. Sister's fiancé openly mocks her for believing in this shit. Paranormal events escalate. Her fiancé is being choked in bed just like my mom had been. Sister is a hippie and burns sage in the house to cleanse it. Okay, weirdo. Convinced the dresser is the root to all my sister and I's experiences throughout life, we decide to burn the dresser. We take the dresser to the desert and burn it. Just fucking scorch this thing and bury the leftover ashes. Events have stopped ever since. Side notes. When you are marked by a demon, you become familiar to them and they seek you out. They know your name, your scent, your aura, and manipulate demi-demons to aid them. I wasn't aware of the devil marks behind the mirrors in the Blue House until I was 27 and talking to my dad. I've had one recurring dream of the devil pulling me through a mirror since I was 15 years old. Connected? I don't fucking know. I don't talk about this, because in my experience, the more you acknowledge or give attention to these thoughts and spirits, the more prevalent they become. Advice. Anything paranormal happens, just ignore it and move on.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.